Well, hello, friends. Welcome to my studio. My name's Kate. I am a mixed media artist working on the South Shore, Massachusetts, and I'm happy to have you here today so I can show you a little bit of my process. So today I'm working on just a 12 by 12 pre-stretched canvas, going for something a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to see, I think, from some of these camera angles. And yeah, to start out, I'm just kind of throwing down some initial colors. I don't usually plan out my colors too far in advance, but I do have some that I generally start with. So right now I have a blue-green, a phthalo blue, I think that's a medium violet, and quinacridone magenta. And then I'll kind of mix things as we go. Oh, yep, broke my palette knife. Off to a good start. That's the first palette knife I ever bought, so I probably am going to glue that one back together and see if that holds up. So now I'm just putting down some white gesso, and a lot of times I'll use that in place of a white for mixing for a few reasons. First, it gives kind of a nice tooth to the paint, and also it's a lot cheaper than like a titanium white. I'm just mixing up a few things to get started. You'll see that I did not clean the brush in between mixing. Sometimes if you have a little bit of the leftover color on the brush, it helps to really make the paint colors kind of more cohesive. So, little trick there. Here we go with my little 12 by 12 canvas, and just starting out with some really easy, simple mark making with a pencil that I probably stole from my daughter's art kit upstairs. And that's a few things. None of that's going to show up in the final painting, but it is just a way to get past that blank canvas at first and get used to the size of the canvas and loosen up a little bit. So, and now we're going in with just a chaos layer, I guess. I can't remember where I first heard that term, but it's pretty accurate. It's really just laying down a chaotic layer of color, and I'm really not worried about composition or anything like that. Really what I'm looking for is just to get that canvas covered up, and I want to get as varied of a mix of colors and values and interesting marks, textures as possible there, just to kind of really get started and have something to build off of. So it's not something that's planned out, it's just sort of throwing down paint. And you'll notice too that like the brush that I'm using for most of this is not a fancy brush. What I usually do is buy those big bags of chip brushes from the hardware store, because I am terrible about cleaning brushes, and I have some really nice brushes, but I'm really hard on them between not washing them or leaving them sitting in water, or even just, mushing them into the canvas, because that's the kind of marks that I like to make. So easier to buy the cheapo ones and use them until they wear out, and then just kind of buy in a new big bag for a couple of bucks. So you do not need fancy art supplies. I'm here to tell you. It's a big secret. But, so that looks like it's pretty well covered up. Oh, here comes the wooden spoon. So one of the things I love to do is to draw into wet paint to make interesting marks and also texture. And I'll use pretty much anything that we have around. So you'll see there's the spoon made an appearance, and things like chopsticks, old credit cards. I have, what else do I use? Toothbrushes, new ones, not used ones, and whatever I have laying around that'll make an interesting mark. And I'll probably go back in with some palette knife marks also, just because I'm trying to get as many varied marks on there as possible. Just most interest as possible, so I have as many things to build off of as possible. Lots of options. And clean off that wooden spoon. And with the trusty hair dryer. So I do, one thing about the paintings that I make is that they have a lot of layers to them. So, and the great thing about acrylic paint is that you can just dry it really fast. So something like a hair dryer or a heat gun is awesome to have, so it can really speed up the process. So I'm not trying to dry this completely. I'm just trying to get it dry enough so that I can add maybe another mark or two and probably some spray paint, because you don't want to put spray paint over wet paint because that will crack. It is not pretty, as I have found out through many years of experimentation. It doesn't go well. Just going back in with a couple of marks. Yep. Okay, and this looks like a mustard bottle, but I promise it's yellow paint. I do think that I actually bought like squeeze bottles for condiments, and I'm just using it for paint. But I promise it's not mustard. So some golden fluid paint with some airbrush medium, just to make it really loose and flowy. Make some really good splatters that way. It's my favorite. I'll just probably squirt some on there. Yep. So just trying to get the most interest possible. Go back in with the chopstick. Chopsticks are one of my favorite tools to use. I have so many packs of them in my studio, just waiting to be used. They're great for so many things, but here I'm just kind of splattering the paint around. It doesn't look just like big drops, although that's cool too. Big splashes. I'm trying to get it to drip a little bit. There we go. So here you can see that I've tried a bunch of different things on this painting since you last saw it. I cut that out just because I wasn't happy with the results and I didn't want to put you through that. So what I'm doing now though is spreading texture paste from Nova over top of what I don't like. The things that I do like are those bursts of color around the edge that you can still see through that thin film of spray paint that's on there. So I'm kind of just making a layer of texture over it. Kind of looks like spreading frosting. It's a very fun process. I'm using one of my large scale palette knives, which I love, from Liquitex, a few of those. You can see all that great texture on there. It's one of my favorite things. Clean those off. This is another one of those large scale palette knives. So this one's a little bit smaller, but I love that one too. And now that we have some wet medium on the canvas, I can go back in with the palette knife and make some really interesting marks, which is what's happening now. So this color I love. I think it's a mixture of Payne's Gray and a little bit of Phthalo Blue, which makes a great combo because the Payne's Gray is a little bit of a bluish tint to it. So you can see in that bottom right hand corner where it goes over the white and it mixes in that little bit of a bluish tint. It's one of my favorite combos. So I'm trying to make some marks and still leave some of those colors around the edges. You can see I'm sort of practicing where I'm going to put it, which I didn't realize how often I do that until I watched the video back, because that's it's kind of funny to watch you just pretending to do things over the top of the painting over and over, but it's helpful. I'm trying to figure out where the composition would look best, and there we go. It's one of my favorite things, is seeing how that paint breaks when you use palette knives over wet paint or medium. I'm just showing you that I did a little bit of blue spray paint just for some added detail. That didn't look so stark. And now, so all of that has dried, and I've added some extra color around the edges, and just going in with a micron pen and adding some floral detail. Just trying to do some really loose flowers. These aren't based in, it's not meant to be a realistic flower drawing or still life or anything like that. It's just meant to be representational of a flower. So my whole goal here was to just have it look like it's coming up through the cracks in the paint. And this series is really about, you know, that idea of flowers growing up through the pavement cracks. So growing through hardships and obstacles and having the strength to just persevere through everything. So all these little details that are being added in are sort of meant to be little glimpses of hope through the cracks. And that's what the colors around the edges remind me of that too. Bursting out, little glimpses of hope around the edges of whatever is holding you back, whatever obstacles you're facing. And this was really based on some sketches that I had done years ago. And I'll have to do a video on that at some point to show you the origins of this. And I've done variations of this over the years. If you guys have been following me for a while, you might remember the Vortex series I did a few years back with all of these details in it. And this really just feels like kind of an organic continuation of that, and coming from a different place, but similar thoughts, similar themes. So this is just a white Jelly Roll pen that I'm just adding some white details similar to the black ones, but on the, add a little bit of variation and value and detailing here. And then just going back in with the Posca marker to add some color and details to the flowers. I love Posca markers, they're just the best. Need to add to my collection. So coloring in some of the leaves, and now I know this is going to drive some of you crazy because I am not coloring these in carefully. I'm going over the lines, I'm missing some of the lines, and I know if I was watching this at home it might drive me a little bit bananas too. But this is on purpose. I want it to look kind of loose and for things to be overflowing or not fully colored in, because it's just meant to be loose and organic and not tight at all. So just kind of doing some loose coloring there. Get those all done, and then probably go back in, I would imagine, with the Micron and just kind of re-detail those close-ups. Yep, go back in with the Micron. I'll do these around all the leaves and probably those yellow spots in the center too, just to redefine them a little bit. That really makes a big difference. But you'll see some of the blue is overflowing out of the flowers, and some of it is not quite to the edges. I just think it adds interest. It's not meant to be perfect. Thank goodness, because I don't think I could do that anyway. The other great thing about those Posca markers is they dry pretty quickly, so it makes for a pretty quick process. I'm just going to show you some close-ups. One of the things I love about this piece is all of the texture and all of the small details. It really is something that you can look at for a long time and always be finding new little areas, little spots, some things peeking through that you may not have seen before. All the texture on it. Little bursts of color. One of my favorites so far. So thanks for coming along with me, and I really hope that you enjoyed this kind of peek into how I made this painting, and I hope to see you again when I'm back in the studio. All right, I'll see you next time.